What's the hockey players that you think are good buys right now?
As ridiculous as it sounds based on what I just said, Ovechkin's still good.
I think he is. I've looked at some of his cards, and some of them are still
Not as
uh,
good as it was, to be
no.
clear. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was much better,
Mm,
given the example I just gave, like
yeah.
the difference in the. But a guy who is chasing, just put it into context. I said he's third all time. I said all those things, but I want to give more context to it, just so that we understand each other. He is the only guy who did not play in the 70s, 80s, or 90s at all, who is at the top of that scoring chart. Everybody else who's right up there, 700 goals plus, 600 and plus, and they're above, all of them played some time in the 70s, Gordie Howe towards the latter portion of his career,
Mm-hmm.
80s, Gretzky dominated the 80s, or the early 90s, the Mario Lemieux and those guys, 80s, a lot of 80s and 90s in there. Jaromir Jagr, a guy who could have been right up there, 90s. Ovechkin played in an era where goal scoring is down across the board, relatively speaking, compared to these guys. The next closest guy to him is Sidney Crosby. He's 270 goals behind him. Ovechkin has lapped him. He's lapped his entire generation. It's not even close.
That's great context.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like in basketball, if like we're getting Will Chamberlain now,
Mm-hmm.
and he decides to score 100 points in a game now, and everybody else is just like, "What on earth are you doing, sir?" It's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And he's doing freakish things, and he's being consistent, and he's doing it into his 30s and into his mid 30s. Does that guarantee he's going to beat Gretzky? No. But Gretzky had the 1980s was a cheat code. It was unfair compared to everybody else. It's the opposite of football. It would be like if you suddenly went back to, by the way, we're banning the forward pass.
Mm-hmm.
So now nobody will throw for 3,000 yards ever again. It's the opposite. And he's still doing it anyway. He doesn't care. He's like, I'm going to score 40 or 50 anyway, just because I can.
All right, Carlos. I see this. The sweatshirt AEW.
Yeah, the
Cody
AW show. Yeah.
Rhodes. Yeah. Reference Seth Rollins WrestleMania.
That's what's projected. That's what's projected. I'm not interested. I think it'll be a good match. I'm sure they'll come up with an interesting story. I think that WrestleMania is gonna be disastrous. I think it's gonna be a terrible show.
When
They'll
is it?
try.
When is the WrestleMania?
It's coming up. I feel like a couple weeks from now. It's not long. It's going to
Okay.
be over in Dallas. They're doing it. They're doing a 2 night one again. They've been doing that the last couple of years. April 2nd and 3rd.
April 2nd and 3rd. Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be that weekend. I'm just not like I haven't bought any WWE pay per views or anything in years. I canceled the
Yeah,
network years ago. It's unwatchable. The show's terrible. It's not that it's not that they lack talent. It's just a miserable. It's an entertainment product. It's like your favorite TV show, but they killed off your favorite characters and the storylines suck. So it's like not interested. Thank you.
yeah,
I will
true.
watch a different show. Thank you.
Yeah. I haven't watched WrestleMania in years.
You're not missing anything at this point. Maybe for probably the last 6 or 7 years, I'd argue you haven't missed a thing.
And people are still watching this stuff though, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they still get like 2 million on Friday night to watch the SmackDown show, and I'm like, why? The show's terrible. But
Interesting.
hey, look, you got nothing better to do on a Friday night? Knock yourself out. I'm doing a live stream. I'm busy.
Yeah, maybe people put it in the background and do other stuff. I don't know.
I guess
There's
so.
nothing
Yeah,
that's really interested me.
yeah. It's a simple rule. I treat it like a TV show. When it comes to wrestling and people ask about it, it's like treat it like a TV show. To me, it's just not exciting. I don't enjoy watching it, and if I don't enjoy watching it, then why would time to me is so valuable now? I
I
care
agree.
so much about my time. It's like,
I
no,
agree.
this had better entertain me. Otherwise, you are wasting my time. And if you're wasting my time, I'm not interested.
I feel it about sporting events. I feel it about movies. I feel it about TV shows.
Yeah.
If it's just something that's not good, I'm not interested in spending the time on it.
Yeah. We got too many options now. There's so much good stuff that you could be watching or listening. You could read a book. You could do a bunch of go sort your cards. Like there's a million options. It's like we got better things to do with our time if this isn't going to be entertaining us.
So Paul says the USFL starts in about a month. I'm interested to see what these games are like.
I love all these generic off-brand
So do
football
I.
leagues.
Mhm.
Love them. It's a little bit out of shot because of the way because they're paying it forward. But I have an original XFL football over in my shelf.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've also got an XFL mini helmet, and I got one of those outlaw like replica. I bought all that stuff on eBay years later after. And then the second iteration of the XFL, I've got a mug and a couple of things. It's like I love that stuff.
Yeah, I enjoy watching it. It's you got guys that are hungry out on the field trying to prove something or live a dream that they had before.
I agree with that.
From the bench, no bigger pops than attitude. era music drops for The Rock, Taker, Stone Cold, Y2J, etc.
I agree. The problem is that was 20 years ago. We can't spend all our time living on 20 years ago. He's accurate. The audience was into it. It was a very different time period and different era. Although some of the stuff doesn't hold up. But The Rock was great. But a lot of his promos and a lot of his jokes and everything is like, you might not. Doesn't work. Doesn't work anymore, my friend. In 1999, you were good. This ain't gonna cut it right now.
True.
Stick to movies. You're good. Stick to movies. You're good.
Why do you think that? I know we see John Cena trying to make the move over to movies
Mm-hmm.
and do other things. Why do you think more wrestlers can't do that? I guess it'd be the same
Can't
question.
or can?
Like, cannot. I guess it'd be
Oh,
the same question like, why don't you see more football players doing certain things? Why don't you see more athletes doing certain things? It's just interesting to me that The Rock has build a personality.
mhm.
He can speak well, express himself.
Yeah.
That's rare.
Ironically, because the current wrestling product in WWE relies too much on scripting.
Okay.
The Rock and John Cena still came from an era where, like, yeah, you've got some bullet points, but you can ad lib.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the point I want you to get across. I need you to make sure you hit on this point. How you get there is up to you. And that in turn opens creativity. It allows you to come up with different ways of expressing yourself. Like I said, what worked in 1999 for The Rock would not work today. But I'm sure if he was asked to, he would tweak and modify certain aspects of it to bring it up to date. So there would be some adjustment made. But that's from learning how to do that. Ironically, by learning how to do that in that avenue, learning how to improv in that
Helps
way,
them in other
it
areas.
means when we go, yeah, you have a script, but now you can interject your personality because you know how to,
Mm-hmm.
because you actually have to do it live in front of an audience. So it translates. Whereas a lot of the folks that are doing it now, it's like, no, I need you to read this verbatim. I need you to memorize it and regurgitate it. It's like, you don't sound like you're in this because I'm reading somebody else's words.
Yeah, true. From the bench says Dan said in an interview the reason a lot of backup QBs are good at coaching, etc., because they're used to having to chum up to all the members of the team and help them with while the starter leads. I don't know about that.
Well, I think it's also that the backup QBs have to, because they're not playing all the time. They have no choice but to sit there and absorb everything they can. They're not getting reps. They're not getting first team reps. So they're like, you better be paying attention to what's going on because if we do need you, you better know what's happening. You better understand the playbook. You better know this. So even if a guy never gets to play really very much, he's spent years and years and years absorbing playbook, listening to tape, listening to breakdowns. They're forced to be a student out of necessity because they don't get to participate in it as much.
I also think there's a something about relating to someone that has less talent.
Yeah.
If you're Joe Montana, or if you're Tom Brady, or you're Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan, your expectation on what you think that player should be able to do, it might be different than the guy that's sitting over here who went to a smaller school or was a lower draft pick or had to work his way through something. The viewpoint may be different, and I think that helps people become coaches. Can you take someone with this talent and foresee what their talent could be? That may be difficult for someone who just athletically or the way their mind works is superior than everybody else is on the field from an athletic or performance perspective than someone who had to work their way through something. I think that's a lot that has to do with backups or people who come from places where they played a Division 2 or Division 3, and now they're great at coaching someone or mentoring someone. Because you don't see people who perform well teaching anyone to perform well. Very
It's the
difficult.
it's the exception. That's why I use the Larry Bird example. He's a guy who had success on the court, who
Mhm.
was able to translate. He was actually able to explain stuff, and I think that helped him. But that's a unique skill set, especially for a guy who was at the level that he was at, won championships, was able to do all these things, and was able to actually teach it and coach.
Yeah,
That's rarer than the other way around.
it's hard. It's hard to do that. It's interesting how that works. So you would think that players who perform very well would be able to step in and do that. But
Frank Robinson was a decent coach.
oh, he was, yeah,
Yeah, so he was a guy who could perform at the top level, but again, it's the exception rather than the rule.
very true.